Good stir here. You like it to run off the paddle about just like that. If it's a little bit too thick or lumpy, that will show up in our wear. And if it's a little bit too thin, it won't set properly. Now, this is called slip, and it's made up of 4 different ingredients, 2 of which we get locally, which are flint and feldspar. The 3rd ingredient is Kentucky ball clay. We get that from Kentucky. And the 4th ingredient is kaolin. Kaolin is a pure china clay, and they get it off the ocean beds off the shores of Florida. And it's such a pure china clay, it's what they make kaopectate out of. So if you've got a problem, we are multi-purpose and we can fix you up back here. We take these 4 ingredients and we'll mix them in one of the large vats there behind you. And we'll let that mix for several weeks, maybe 6 to 8 weeks, almost 2 months maybe. The longer the clay mixes, the more pliable it is to work with, the better the ingredients all fuse together, the better our product is. Your very large companies like Homer Laughlin that make the Fiesta out there, they may let their clay mix 4 to 6 months before they start working with it. The more your ingredients come together and work as one, the better your wear is. Now what we do is we pour molds. Molds are made of plaster of Paris, and they're with the design hollowed out on the inside. This is how all things hollow are made. Pitchers, bowls, vases, mugs, including the pitcher I will be using today, are all made the same way. Now, the molds are made of plaster of Paris, and they act like a giant sponge. What we'll do is we'll fill up each of these openings right up to the top with our slip. What's going to happen is the mold's going to absorb the water out of the clay, and we'll start to see a fine edge form around each of these openings. Now that takes a couple minutes to form. We never know exactly how long. Always is dependent on the heat and the humidity in the room. Luckily, it's a little bit cooler today. That is always a little bit more helpful than a really hot, muggy day. It sets a little bit better. So while we give that just a few minutes to set, I'll take you through the process of making one of our items. Whenever we open a mold, the piece that comes out of the inside is known as greenware. Greenware simply means, that one doesn't want to come right out. It tapped out there. Now if I had tried to bend it out, it would probably bend out of shape, and if I tried to fix it, I would continue to make it worse. So you have to be very careful when we remove a piece out of the mold. They're still very soft, and they're called greenware because they're still green, which means they're very soft, very pliable. So what we'll do is we'll take it out of the mold. We'll set it on one of the drying racks here behind me. Let it dry for a day or 2. Then we'll have something a little bit more solid to work with. It's still very brittle, very fragile. I could probably crush it right in my hand, but at least I can't bend it out of shape. The next step is wherever these two halves of the mold come together, wherever a mold comes together, we get a fine edge that forms around the edge here that needs to be cleaned off, cleaned up. So using our knife, we'll go around, we'll clean that whole piece all the way around on that edge. We'll use a damp sponge, we'll make it nice and smooth. If we were to glaze and fire this while it still has those edges, once it's glazed and fired, those edges can become very sharp in the firing process, and they can also become sharp like a knife. So they has to be cleaned very well. It's not a job anyone really enjoys doing because the pieces, if it's going to break, it never breaks in the beginning. It always breaks at the very end when you think, yes, I'm almost all done, I've got it. And then it breaks at the end. If we do break a piece, it cannot be repaired, but we can recycle 30% of our wear back into our clay mixture, reconstitute it, and still use it. We just can't do it with everything. The next step we do is glazing. Glaze is called frit, and it's made up of very fine ground up glass. And we use it in a vat very similar to that. When it dries to a very white, chalky powder. Now what we'll do is taking our greenware, again that's the unfired, unfinished clay, we'll dip our greenware right in the vat of glaze. We always want to dip very quickly. If we linger too long in that vat of glaze, what's going to happen is the greenware, being that it's so porous, it's going to absorb the water out of that glaze. You'll start to feel it change in your hand. It might even slip out of your hand, and then you're armpit deep in a vat that size trying to dig it back out of the bottom of the vat. Nobody wants to do that either. So we always dip our greenware very quickly. We're going to apply a little bear here as well, so we'll dip him in the glaze as well. We'll put them together just like that, and we'll set them on the kiln together just like that. We'll fire these two pieces up to 2,000 degrees. It'll take about 9 hours to heat up to that temperature, 12 hours to cool, but when they come out of the kiln, they will be one solid piece. Now chances are if I dropped this, the bear would not break off of the leaf. Something else would probably break. This is a very secure bond. It's usually how handles are applied to mugs, spouts on teapots, sometimes even knobs on mugs or knobs on lids are applied in the same manner. So that is very secure. The next step we get into is decorating. That's the part everybody enjoys. And we decorate this particular piece with a mother of pearl or a luster paint. And you can see it goes on kind of corally, pinkish peach. And it's applied in a swirling and a dabbing motion. We only have 1 or 2 people here that can do that just right. I'm not one of those people. I have tried over the years, and every time it comes out of the kiln, you can see my brush strokes on the piece, and that's not the effect we want. So our people will apply that finish on there, and we'll fire this piece again. We'll fire it up to 1,350 degrees this time. It'll take about 4 hours to heat up, 8 hours to cool, but when it comes out of the kiln, you can see that transformation from that colored paint to that beautiful opalescent mother of pearl finish. So that's quite a transformation in that one firing. The next step we get into is the expensive part of what we do, and that's painting with pure 22 karat gold.
Wow.
Now we buy our 22 karat gold in a bottle about just like this, and it looks a little bit like molasses. But if you're paying for the bottle, you know you're not buying molasses. When the owners bought the business back in the mid-60s, this little bottle cost about $25 to $35. Still a hefty price at that time. But now this little bottle is up over ranges between $1,700 and $2,000 for the same little bottle. Cost of gold is very high right now. So since the cost of gold is so high, we always paint our gold on with a paintbrush by hand. We never want to spray it or dip. We never want to lose any gold. We don't want to waste any. We'll trim our leaf in the gold trim, put the gold around the edges. We're going to paint the little bear in the gold as well. We're going to fire this one more time. We're going to fire it up to 1,350 degrees, 4 hours heating up, 8 hours cooling. But when it comes out of the kiln, you can see that beautiful transformation from that brown colored molasses looking paint to that beautiful 22 karat gold finish. What happens is the oils that suspend the gold to make it a liquid burn away in the firing, and you're just left with the pure 22 karat gold. So you can see it's quite a process to go from pouring the piece to having the piece that's ready to go out on the showroom floor for sale. It takes us about 10 days to turn a piece out. Painting, firing, drying time, working time. So if someone wanted maybe 4 dozen of these, it would take us a little while, maybe a month to get them all turned over, because we have about a dozen molds. We'd have to turn the molds, get them going, turn another set, and get them going again. So it is a little bit time consuming. There is a process. If we step back here, we can see there is an edge forming on those molds. We like to see that just get a touch thicker, just a touch. If we let them get too thick, they will retain moisture and then they may explode in the kiln. And if we let them if we dump the clay out and it's a little bit too thin, excuse me, it'll make our ware very difficult to work with through the whole process. So while I give that just another minute or two, I'll tell you about the weeping gold you may have seen in the showroom. This is called weeping gold. It's been made here since the mid-40s. It's a process very similar to decorating Easter eggs with a wax relief. What we'll do is, using our greenware, again that's the unfired, unfinished clay, we will take a damp natural sea sponge with wax on it, and we will dab wax all over this piece. Now you can see that by doing that, we're never going to have any two pieces that will be the same. They're always going to be different. You can never apply the sponge the same way. You'll never apply that wax the same way. So we'll apply that wax, and then we'll take our piece and we'll dip it in the glaze. The glaze is not going to stick wherever that wax has been applied. It's going to get into the nooks and crannies in between. We'll take that piece and we'll fire it up to 2,000 degrees in the kiln. When it comes out of the kiln, you can see we'll have that two-textured finish. The shiny areas are where the glaze was able to stick, and the dull areas are where the wax was applied, and the wax burns off in the firing process. Then we'll take this piece We'll paint the entire thing up with the 22 karat gold, covering the entire piece. We'll paint the whole thing. We'll fire it again to 1350 degrees. And when it comes out of the kiln, you can see we'll have that beautiful weeping gold finish. The shiny areas are where the glaze was able to stick. The dull areas are where the wax was, which gives it that rougher finish.